Amanda, welcome.
Hi, Jenelle. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
That's a big mission.
Yeah, it's a pretty big mission. It's been in the making for quite some years. So,
I mean, with everything that you've been through and everything that you go through these days, it's hard not to live a life with a label stuck on you.
yeah, very true.
We live with labels. We can do a label as small as I'm blonde, I'm a real
Right.
estate agent, I'm a podcaster, and we create our own persona based on that. Let alone if you have labels like yourself of being addicted to drugs, being formerly incarcerated. Those are big labels that if you let them take over your life, how do you have a life after that?
Exactly. And, I lived probably it's been about 13 years since I've been out of jail. And it was just these past couple of years and pretty much this year that I decided to stop allowing these labels to control my life because I lived that way for so long. And it was really bad to the point where I never lied to a job, like, an opportunity. I never said, "No, I haven't been convicted," but if they didn't ask, I didn't offer the information. So then I had jobs, like, I worked in an accounting firm, I worked in a law firm, and every day I would go to that job, I feared, "Okay, well, today's the day they're gonna find out, and I'm gonna lose everything." And today it was like every day I lived like that, or even just walking into a grocery store. Still to this day, like, I assume everybody knows I'm a felon. And it's the stigma around it and the fact that I wrote my own narrative of who that makes me based on what I've heard from others. So throughout life, society, movies, parents talking about criminals or whatever, because in all honesty, because when you're growing up, your parents talk about that stuff on a bad angle to keep you from
And
doing
it's
those.
never going to be you in their minds.
Yes, exactly. So when it happened, I hid it because I was so afraid of everyone's judgment. And in hiding it, I was hiding myself. I wasn't allowing myself to stand in my own and accept myself for who I am. So how could I expect anyone else to accept me either? So I was attracting a lot of toxicity, not just with men, like friendships, coworkers, jobs, even like very toxic environments because in the back of my mind, I thought that's what I deserved. I deserved to be miserable. Since the age of 15, I thought I deserved to be alone and miserable because when my parents got divorced and all that happened, and then add on top of that, now I'm a felon. So it was really hard for me to be productive and to accept myself and forgive myself for the bad choices that I'd made in the past. And now looking back, like, if I wouldn't have made those choices, I wouldn't be me. Who would I be without those labels, so to speak? And I would have no point of view to speak on the things that I talk about if my life would have been sunshine and rainbows, which nobody's life is. And, our lives are not Instagram reels, right? So
As much
as
as we
much
want
as
them to
we
be.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, it's been a rough ride, but since embracing my story and coming out and sharing it with the world and being so raw with what I share, nothing negative has happened. Like, I'm sure there are people who don't like me,
But that was going to
obviously,
happen
but
regardless.
yeah, exactly. So now I don't have to hide. The job I have now, my day job, my boss knows about my past, and she allowed me to tell my story and still gave me the job. And I work at a mental health outpatient practice, like something that thought was out of reach for me. And it was because I embraced, and yeah, it was scary. Like, don't get me wrong, sitting in that room and telling this stranger this story was not easy, but in doing that, I became stronger, and I was then offered a job that I could provide for my family with. So
And also a type of job that aligns with exactly what you can offer to people.
exactly. Yeah, that's what's cool too, and I remember, like, because it was right after I lost my job at the law firm, and I was looking for jobs, and I found this one, and I applied, and I was like, "Oh, she probably won't wanna talk to me, but then she responded right away, but then, like, there was all this time it took forever for me to get to the point where I got the job, but something kept me going because typically I don't chase anyone or anything, so
Good.
for me to, like, stay there along the road means that there was something in my gut, my intuition was telling me that that's where I needed to be right for this moment in my life, so.
Mm. So you live in Pennsylvania. Legally, do you have to disclose that you've been convicted of a felony when you're applying for jobs? Or you leave that
Not
to them to do their background check?
Yeah, it's up to
Okay.
them. Like, some people will have it on their applications, but for whenever I was looking for work, this is probably, like, 10 years well, wait, no, because my daughter was born. Probably, like, 7 years ago.
Yeah.
When I was looking, I didn't have to submit, like, an application, I just sent in my resume, and I don't put that
Mhm.
on my resume. But if you lie on an application, as far as I know, like, it's not like you would get a criminal conviction for that, you would just lose your job.
Right.
So it was one of those things where they didn't ask and they didn't do a background check, so in my mind, it was cool, but I still had that fear of being
Always.
found out, so that was the hardest part of all jobs, and then also on top of that, because of that, I was overworking myself, like, that was the issue
Well,
one of
you're
the issues
trying
when
to
I worked.
overcompensate for
Yeah,
being found out.
exactly. Yeah, so
So
I
you're
was like, "Well, I
already
better be really
stressed.
good."
Yeah, you're already stressed about being found out and you're, like, harboring all this guilt, and then you're overworking and burning yourself out. Like, Jesus,
Yeah.
it's a recipe for disaster.
It was, and at my last job, I'm bound by an NDA, so I can't tell, like, the actual details of what happened there, and why I lost my job, essentially, but I will say that while I was there, I was working myself to the bone because I thought I had to prove myself to these people because they were wealthy, they had all these things, they had nice cars, nice clothes, like, everything was just perfect, perfect, perfect all the time. They would go out and drink and party, and I just thought, "Wow, like, these guys are the best, so I better do the best I can at this job because I wanna get invited to their parties or I wanna do whatever." It's just stupid shit that I used to care about, and it was destroying me. 100% was destroying me, and I'm grateful that I lost that job now. Well, in the moment, I was not, but looking back, like, I'm grateful that I got out when I did because it was only going to affect me
Mhm.
even I don't even know where I would be if I was still there right now. Probably a drunk somewhere, so
I mean, it
who
sounds like a
knows?
juicy story. I wish you didn't sign that NDA.
It is pretty juicy, I will say that.
Is there a timeline when that NDA ends?
And I don't know, I haven't looked at I
Pull
still
out the
have it somewhere,
contract.
I have to see. Yeah, I'll have to see because maybe I can, I don't know. But, with that job too, like, that was the last straw, that was my last rock bottom, and I hope I don't ever have a rock bottom again, but in trying to prove myself constantly to other people, I've been doing that since I was 15, and I was making sacrifices, I wasn't listening to myself, I was constantly from my best friend that I made at 17 and on, it was constantly like, "Well, if I don't, even though it feels wrong to me, but if I don't do it, she's not gonna like me anymore, or he's gonna leave me, or I'm gonna" someone, I don't know, in my mind, the world might come to an end if I don't do these drugs right now, like, it was always I would always fall for the pressure, the peer pressure, I was always feeling I was backed into these corners, and my most recent rock bottom, the issue is that I had my ex who hates my husband breathing down my neck, texting me constantly that I'm a piece of shit, I'm this, I'm that, my husband's garbage, threatened to kill my husband, like, all this crazy's going on. Meanwhile, I have this hectic, very, very high stress job, and I'm being pressured into trying to keep all those people happy, and then I'm trying to keep my husband and I together, and it all blew up in my face. Let's just put it that way. It just was like, "Kapow, this isn't gonna work. Try again." It got to the point where I was believing everybody else that my husband wasn't good for me and that he didn't love me, and because we would fight over because of my ex, And so I would go to work and I'd be crying or upset about something. Like I was such a drama queen. I can't even stand myself when I think about that. But
It's
I
okay.
would go to, I would go to work and just be super emotional. And I would get embraced by these people who I thought were my friends. And, oh, well, you don't need that in your life. So I started talking to another man. Like I didn't cheat on my husband. Thank God I didn't cheat on my husband. But I was doing things that I would never have been okay with if he was doing.
Mm. There's a
So, yeah,
lot of
no, yeah,
parallels here of like patterns repeating themselves. And
yeah,
I know you know that.
yeah. Now, not then. I see that's
Fair.
the scary part too, because I didn't realize what was happening. It was like I was just stuck in this tornado, and all I was worried about was keeping everything afloat. So, like, I had to lie to my ex, about whatever trivial thing he was talking about so that he would get off my back. And then I had to lie to my husband so that he didn't know that I was lying to my ex. Then I would go to work and they'd be telling me shit, and then I'd have to lie. It was just, and I hate lying. I'm a terrible liar. And that's just how I was living. And it was eating me alive. And
Mm.
not to mention, I was hiding the fact that I had this criminal record and I was drinking with these people. So I mean, when Amanda drinks, that's why she doesn't anymore. One of the reasons is things just come out of my mouth. So I was risking everything every single day of my life for no reason, apparently. So
Mm. A
yeah,
drunk
it was a
mind
lot.
speaks a sober heart.
Yep, that is so true, and I used to make a lot of bad choices when I drank, and not just in, like, what I would say to people, but I would be promiscuous, I was always seeking out the next best thing to not feel anymore, like, I was just wanted to be numb, and then I got addicted to the lifestyle, so, like, in my, like, early-ish 20s, like, late teens, that lifestyle, like, I loved it, I was obsessed, I was like, "Okay, well, look, all these people love you, Amanda, like, you have to keep doing this, like, keep partying. Oh, they wanna do cocaine? So do you, because then you get to stay right here where you're at with all of these people, and you won't be alone, and you don't have to feel any pain," and that blew up in my face when I got arrested because that's what my life was. It was just trying to numb my pain of everything that was going on, and then me and my friend were broke and made a really bad choice and involved other people. And now here we are, like I'm not friends with her anymore. Like the point of that story of me getting incarcerated, and not the only point, but one of them is the fact that I did that. I made that choice because I didn't want to lose my friend, but
Mhm.
I'm not even friends with her anymore.
So you lost everything.
I lost everything. I haven't been friends with her pretty much since then. Yeah, I
Of
haven't
course not.
talked to her. So it's, at the end of the day, like when we make these choices and we ignore ourselves, like we have to really take a moment before you make a risk like that because choosing to rob someone is not a choice anybody needs to make. And I just wish that I could go back and like tell younger me, like, this is not a good choice for
Mhm.
you or anybody involved. So, yeah.
When we go back and we go right back to the labels and the stereotypes and the stigmas, when I judge a book by its cover and that book being you, you don't look like anyone that would be involved in any of this. You know that though.
Yeah, I got told the other day that they were like, "I would never have thought that you had been incarcerated." They're like, "You look like the girl next door." And I'm like, "What?" Like, but,
And you think
that's the
back, you're like,
thing.
you don't know what I'm capable of. Like,
Yeah,
I
like,
am
you have no
feisty.
idea. Yeah,
I can
I
see
was
that glimmer in you, but a quick glance, I'm like, yeah, no, you're that sweet girl next door that can probably be pulled into a bad crowd pretty easily and
yeah, that's
very
exactly it.
easily influenced.
Very, and that's why now I have my bubble, and because of the pandemic, like, my day job, I work from home most days, and when I am in the office, it's me and my boss, there's nobody else around, and so now over these past, like, 2 years now, I've created this bubble, and I don't go outside of my bubble, so I'm home all the time, and so my social anxiety has increased. So, like, when I think about going back to work, which I don't know if that ever will full time, I don't wanna be there, and,
Mhm.
that job too, like, there's not a whole lot of people there, it's just something about being in that atmosphere with other people that freaks me out, and I feel like I haven't been exposed to that in so long, like, working in an actual office with other people, that I fear I'm not ready to handle it emotionally, and I just don't wanna fall victim to anything ever again, so I think I've created some walls instead of boundaries, if that makes sense.
Easy to break down those walls if you allow it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
tend to believe boundaries are a bit stronger.
Yeah, like, with my boundaries now, like, I feel like if I were to work, because I was telling my husband too, I was like, "Well, what happens if my business that I'm trying to launch right now doesn't take off, and then my day job, like, what if my boss does retire and no one takes it over, and then I have to go back to a regular job, like, what am I going to do?" Like, that's where
What's
I
that
get
answer?
stuck, and right now, it's like, "No, you're not doing that." That's the only answer I can think of, but also when I see it or imagine it in my mind happening, I see myself as stronger than I was,
Mhm.
and if someone were to ask me now to go to the bar, I would definitely say no. I know that because I haven't drank since I lost that job pretty much, so that's been, like, 2 years, 3 years almost. But as far as people, like, when especially women, my issue is much more women related than men, so I've always been burned by best friends, like, I don't even have a best female friend right now at all, like, my husband's my best friend. So he's, like, all I talk to, well, my mother-in-law too, but
Mhm.
other than
And
that,
we
like,
know
I'm by
as
myself.
females, like, you need those strong female relationships. It's like nothing else compared to a strong male relationship. But when you've been burned by a female, it hurts way more.
Yeah,
The
and
trust
the
is way
betrayal.
worse. Yeah, the betrayal is
Yeah.
way worse because I think innately, and I'm not gonna speak for you, I'll speak for myself. I already assume a man is gonna betray me. They're gonna hurt me in some way where it's like you have this kinship with women, or I find I do, that I'm like, we're on the same team here. And then when
Yeah.
I'm betrayed by a woman, especially if it's like a really close friend and I lose that trust, I'm hurt way more.
Yeah, I can see that because with men, with, like, friendship men and not dating men,
Mhm.
like, my issue with that is I become friends with a man, and then all of a sudden they think we're, like, gonna have sex, and it's like,
Mhm.
"No, no, we're not." So, like, that's, like, the pretense that's in my head about men, same thing, it's like, "Okay, like, gosh, I hope this one doesn't eventually wanna get in my pants," and then you know what I mean? So,
And when we
it's
assume they
different.
only ever want one thing from us.
Yeah, and then when you meet a man and he is a true friend, like, it's hard. It's weird, you're like,
And then
"Wait,
you
like,
start liking him because you're used because,
that's
wait, why don't you want that from me?
when I was single, I've had, like, little like, very small increments of time throughout my life where I was single that I could add up would probably equal maybe 2 years, maybe 1.
You're a serial monogamous.
I am, but I can remember, like, being single, especially at one point when I was first released from jail, I was single, and for a while there, so maybe I was right with 2 years total, but any guy who would, like, wanna be my friend, I would start liking them. I'm like, "What is wrong with me?" Like, this is not why I started this friendship with this person, you know?
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's an attention thing? Do you think it's like, what do you think it is? Because I know a lot of women go through this.
I think for me, it was the sense of this person cares about me and he's a man, so we should date. It's like I can't separate the 2. Like when I was a stripper for the period of time between being arrested and then getting sentenced, which is like an entire year of your life. So I made the wonderful choice of being a stripper, but when I first started there, I was okay. Like the guys were clients. Like I didn't do anything,
Saw
but
that
after a
line.
while yeah, but
It's
then
probably an
that line
easier boundary than anything else.
well, that line would get blurred,
Yeah.
and then eventually I started having feelings for clients, like men that probably weren't even telling me their real names. I was like, "Oh, he's back to see me," and, the one guy, like, bought a private room just so I could sleep because he saw that I was tired and I wasn't feeling well, and I just, like, laid on his lap and slept, like, and I would catch feelings to the point where I started dating men from the club, and wound up pregnant to a man, and that when I was incarcerated, I was pregnant with his child the whole time. So, I think for me, it's always been an issue, not with men all around, and then with women, it's just I trust too quickly. I think
Mm.
that with women, it's like, "Oh, like, she's gonna be my new best friend, and, I'm gonna tell her everything, and then if she says that I'm her best friend, then look out." And it could be, like, a week into meeting this person, and all of a sudden, they're, like, my best friend, and, like, in the moments of when I would allow that to happen years ago, like, I'd be so excited, and then with my husband, this one girl I became close with, he's like, "But you don't know her." He's like, "How can you open up to her and tell her all of your shit when you literally just met her?" And then she did end up betraying me big time. So,
We
I
we
don't
always
know.
say women have better intuition, but in that situation, your husband was
Well,
saw
he's a
all the red
very
flags.
yeah. He's a really good judge of character, which
Mhm.
helps me out so, so much. Because, like, in the online space too, like, it's harder because people can tell you whatever they want,
Mhm.
and then whenever they shut Zoom down, they live in, like, a shack or they're, like, whatever.
You don't
You
know who
just
you're
don't
talking to,
know.
really.
Right, you don't. You have no idea. So, for me, like, with him, I'll be like, "Okay, babe, like, I met this new person. Can you look at them and tell me if they're legit?" And he's never been wrong. Not one.
And that's why you're married to him.
Yes, because he fills in where I can't. Because I
You
have
have blinders
blinders
on.
on.
Yeah.
I do. I wanna see the good in everyone, and I wanna believe that everyone is trustworthy, and that's
Mhm.
just not the case, and I think that's really hard for me to understand because I would never betray someone the way I've been betrayed, and I expect that other people are like me, and I have to remember that people like me are one in many or however you would say
Mhm.
that, but I mean, I have found other people that are like me online, but not in person. So I don't know.
But being that type of person and knowing that that's hard to come by and most people aren't like that, how do you not become cold and cynical about the world? Or you do?
That's a hard one. I wouldn't say I'm cold and cynical. I
I know you're not, but how do you not become that? Like, how do you still stay true to who you are with still like being smart about seeing other character?
because I just always remind myself, like, no matter what, that people do things in any given moment the only way they know how. So if someone is being rude, disrespectful, or trying to take advantage or spamming or whatever we want to call it, like, you don't know what that person is going through. And yeah, it hurts when you're caught in the crosshairs, so to speak, and you get betrayed or whatever, but take time to mourn that person, but then at the end of the day, you have to forgive that person because they were only doing the best that they could in that moment. So you don't know if maybe that friend of mine, she was just like me and was looking for acceptance and we both burned each other. I'm not perfect. I've fucked people over. I've intentionally in the past have fucked people over. And I've been on both sides and I'm not a bad person. So who am I to judge anyone else for their choices in any
I want to bring you all the way back to where it all began. Of course,
Okay.
cliche. But when you look back, like it's one choice, then it's another choice, then it's a domino of choices that lead you end up being in prison. And how old were you at the time? You were young.
Yeah, I was very young. I was 22 when we got arrested. I think when I got sentenced, 23, because it's really hard for me to remember how old I was, but I know when I got out, I was 25. So I must have got sentenced right before I turned 24
So
to
you were
birth of
incarcerated for 2
Mary.
years or 1 year.
No, 8 months. I was sentenced to 1 to 2 years.
This is gonna be a weird question. What was
Mhm.
worse, being out running around with this type of crowd or being in jail?
Honestly, it would have been being out because in jail, it was very controlled. I wasn't allowed to just make choices. I had to live a certain way. I had to wake up at a certain time. I had to eat at a certain time. I had to do my chores. Like, even though in the moment and even looking back, still, like, I hated it, it was awful. It taught me a lot about life. And now, from being incarcerated, I don't thrive when I don't have structure. So,
Interesting.
because and I think that's what was missing in my life prior to incarceration. I never had structure. I was just, like, winging it all the time. Just like, "Oh, I'll figure it out. Okay, let's figure this out." Doing whatever I could to keep me floating and moving forward.
Mhm.
But being incarcerated, I was shown okay, this is a schedule. This is a routine. This is what you do. We wake up and we eat and then we go and do this, and it was very structured, and I would say being out was hell. Being in was hell, but if I had to pick a
Which
hell at that point, it would have been being incarcerated because at least I knew where I was.
and you have a
I
daughter, you know this.
Yeah, I do. She's 8. Yeah, I would never wish this on her or my son for that matter, but crap. So, when I got out of abusive relationship and had my own place and my friend decided that we should live together. So we moved in together and I don't remember if she introduced me to cocaine before we moved in together or after, but that's not really relevant. Because being out on bail, you're in limbo for like a year of your life.
You
And
can't go
I
get a
wouldn't, w-
job, you can't go be hanging out with people, you can't start a life, you're kinda just waiting around for a year,
yeah.
which is crazy.
Yeah. So, you don't wanna start anything 'cause you don't know what's gonna happen, and that was the hardest time in my life. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. That was such a dark chapter, and the fact that me, Amanda, was taking my clothes off for money is just not something I ever thought would happen because 'cause I'm super insecure. Like, you couldn't pay me enough right now to go and take my clothes off, like, no. Yeah, it's just crazy the choices that we make when we're in such turmoil in our minds.
Mm. So you got arrested, for robbery, right? You and your friend.
Yeah, there's 5 of us all
Okay.
together that did
Who are
it,
you
but
robbing
yeah.
and why? That's a pretty
Okay.
blunt question.
Yeah, so,
Like, how are you
um
getting yourself involved in this? You're 21, 22 years old. There's
yeah,
no
I was
22-year-old sweet girl that should be going to jail.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So, when I got out of abusive relationship and had my own place and my friend decided that we should live together. So we moved in together and I don't remember if she introduced me to cocaine before we moved in together or after, but that's not really relevant. But we were using cocaine heavily to the point where like that's all I wanted and thought about. My son was very small at this time. And when I look back, I would smack myself, like, I was such a horrible mom, and I don't care. I was a bad mom. He was not a priority. So, then I met my sister was home. She was living in Georgia at the time, and she was stripping at a local club. So, when she was here, I was like, "Oh, well, let's go visit her," told my friend. So, we go and see her at the club. And I'm sitting at the bar, and there's this much older man sitting with me, and he's telling me he could give me a job. Like, I probably told him my whole sob story about how I had no money. Who knows? I was drunk and young. He was just up my ass and told me he could offer me this job. He had this very, like, well-to-do business. I'm like, "Sweet." He's like, "You can work from home. I'll get you an apartment. I'll make sure you're taken care of." And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? And so
Sounds too good to be
time
true.
yeah, well,
Mhm.
and then eventually I meet him afterwards. I wouldn't let him know where I lived. I was smart enough to do that. So I would meet him somewhere in my car. I would drive somewhere and he'd pick me up. And it turns out that he was not going to have a job for me. He wanted to pay me to go out on dates, but there would be no sex. Still, I'm like, okay, why not? That sounds easy.
You're like, "I'm gonna
But
do
then
this regardless."
yeah, this is great, money and all I have to do is go out with you and you're gonna buy me shit, why not? But then I met up with him again and he promised me a certain amount of money to go out on this date. We go and he's buying me stuff. We're at the mall and I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm like a princess, you know? And then we get back to his place and I'm like, can you take me back to my car? And he was like, not until you come and lay down with me. I'm like, great. Now I'm trapped here.
Mhm.
Maybe it wasn't the best idea to have him pick me up at all myself. But so I'm in his bed, I'm laying down, and my phone's just like buzzing like crazy. I was dating someone. I had a boyfriend and I had a son. So who knows, who is texting me. And this guy turns to me and says that if my phone went off again, that he was going to fucking kill me. And I was just like, "Hey, cool. We're just gonna, like, go over there." And I was scared to death. And he was, like, asking me to do all these things that I really didn't wanna do, but I didn't know how to get out of the situation without giving in. So eventually I gave in to some of his demands. But all in all, he sexually assaulted me and took advantage of me, whatever you want to call it. And then he did take me back to my car. And I remember going back to my place and just like brushing my teeth like I had never brushed my teeth before. It was disgusting. I felt so gross. And then now in hindsight, I see what he was doing. This was a more recent discovery that he was essentially grooming me to traffic me. I
Yeah.
didn't know that. And when I had that realization, like a month or so ago now, it like sent chills down my spine that was going to be my life if I would have allowed it. But whenever he took me back to my car, he like didn't give me the amount of money that we agreed on because we didn't have actual sex. So then I really realized what was going on for the kind of, sort of, not really. I didn't really fully get it yet, you know? And like I said, it was very recently that I fully realized what was actually happening with this guy. And then time goes by, and I know my friend and I stupidly went and saw him together a couple of times, and like he wasn't paying us because we weren't. We just like it was
How
just
are you
like
getting
we were
sucked back in then?
because she said she'd go with me, and I thought that I was like, "Okay, well, if I don't go alone," like, even though, like, I didn't want to, she just wanted his money. So, I was
But if you
doing
keep
whatever
not
I
getting the
could.
money, what keeps bringing you back?
Well, we went I don't know if we went once because the second time might have been the robbery. I don't know if we went once or twice, though, together. I can't remember. But she would just keep saying, "Oh, we should go together, blah, 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 blah." And I'm like, "Okay, well, you're my friend, so I trust you, right? So and I don't wanna lose you, so we're gonna do this," even though he assaulted me and whatever. I remember, like, at one point, we were there at his apartment, and he had, like, all these stripper clothes, like, just tons of, like, outfits.
And no
And he was
bells
like,
are going
"Oh."
off.
None, none. Like, I was so stupid. It's so frustrating to think about, but it was her birthday, and we were broke. We couldn't pay rent. We had no drugs. So, I was drunk, and I called him. And I was like, "Can you please, like, get us money? Like, we're so desperate. She needs cocaine." But when I called, another woman answered the phone. She went off on me. She was like,
Mm.
"I'm his woman, like, you stay the fuck away from him, he gets me my drugs and blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "Bitch," I was like, "I just need cocaine." Like, this is seriously like me, this is the conversation I'm having with this random person that I don't even know, right? So
You can
then
look
that
back and
pissed.
laugh being like, "This is crazy."
Yeah, and I think about how I used to talk, like, Facebook memories are great for reminding me of how I used to talk. I'm just like, "Who is this?" Like, I would never talk like that, but I did, and that's the life I was living. And so the next morning, she looked at me and I told her what happened. She goes, "Fuck that," or something, and she's said something along the lines of like, "Let's just go rob him then." And I was like, "Okay."
Uh,
And
Everything you've told me so far doesn't sound like a crazy idea.
but then I'm like, inside, I'm like, "Oh, we're really not gonna do this, you know, like, this isn't actually gonna happen," but it did, and we involved 3 men to go with us because me and her were gonna go in and get him into the bathroom, and then we were gonna text the guys to come in and rob him. It was like this perfectly laid out plan. We had knives on us. We were hauling ass, like, we were so cool, you know? So awesome. And we get
Who are these
out to
guys,
rob.
Amanda? Just random guys that,
Well,
like, that you're hanging out
no.
around with?
Well, so the one of them was someone I dated, and at the time, I don't know if me and him were actually together still or not, but, he was there and his 2 cousins.
Got it.
So it was yeah, that was us. All 5 of us get in my car, and I'm driving, and I look over at my friend, I'm sweating, like, all of a sudden, sweating profusely, shaking to the point where, like, my legs are just, like I was just convulsing, and I looked at my friend, and I was like, We're going to jail, I can't do this." She's like, "Fuck this." She goes, "Just pull over, I'll fucking drive." Dude, like, That was my get out of jail free card. I should have abort mission, like run away, like whatever. I knew where I was. Like the town that I pulled off the highway at, like I knew where I was. My ex's house was like in walking distance. I could have went there, but I didn't. I literally got out of my car, let her get into the driver's seat, and I sat in that car because I said, I can't lose her. I mean, if I lose her as a friend, what do I have? And then eventually, like, we get to the apartment. I couldn't do anything. I was
You
sweating,
you let the
and
devil take the wheel.
I did. Yes, I did. And so I'm sweating profusely, and the guy, we're at his apartment, me and her and him. He goes, "What is wrong with you?" I was like, "Nothing, I'm fine." He goes, "Ah," he's like, "I can tell." I'm like, "I'm gonna puke everywhere." So I didn't have my phone because this was, like, in the early 2000s, so all of us didn't have cell phones yet, and so I gave my phone to the guy I was dating or whatever, and she had her phone, and so I snatched her phone out of her hand, and I said, "I have to go in the hallway and call and check on my son." So I go out in the hallway, I ran down to where the guys were at, they're in the laundry room, and I said, "If you're gonna do it, just do it. I'm fucking out. I'm done. I'm not doing this shit." And I ran out to my car. I didn't leave. I didn't call the cops. I didn't, like, do anything proactive. I laid in the back seat of my car and cried my eyes out until all of a sudden I'm being, like, ambushed by all the guys. They're coming in the car, like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Oh my god. I'm just like this baby, and then we didn't even get out of the parking lot. Like, they didn't take his phone, they didn't, like they did nothing to prevent us from getting caught, and I was pulled over at gunpoint, and I was asked to step out of my car, hands in the air, like, guns drawn, like, I'm being handcuffed. I'm getting laid face down on the pavement, like, on this busy-ass street with people, so it's like a highway almost, but with there's, like, restaurants and shit on
Yeah,
either
yeah.
side. So there's, like, people, like, looking down at this whole big fucking scene, and I'm being arrested. So, I told the cops everything, which is a big no-no. Did not know that. Did not know I wasn't supposed to tell the cops the truth.
And for people who don't
Um,
understand why? Why not?
because it's I don't know how to say this because I do respect cops. I have nothing bad to say about them. They were doing their job. But never trust the police when you're in a situation like that until you've spoken to an attorney and you know what you can and shouldn't say. Because I made the big mistake of not just verbally telling them the truth, I wrote that shit down. I wrote a written statement that was probably 5, 6, 7, 8 pages because they told
Who
me
did
they
you
were
think you were
gonna
helping? Oh, you were convinced
they
that they were gonna help you.
yeah, they told me I would
Amanda, have
not
you
see
never seen a
jail.
single movie before?
Well, I don't know, like, it was just, like, all in the moment. It was just this
Or you're
huge, like
scared. You're
I
22
was
years old.
scared to death, and I was like, "I'm never gonna see my son again, like, I just wanna see
You
my son,
knew.
I just wanna see my
Yeah.
son." And they told me I would get out, that I wouldn't go to jail. I was like, "Okay, well, if I'm not going to jail, I don't have to risk anyone really knowing that I told the truth, so why not?" But I didn't. I did not get out. I had a $10,000 bond to get out, and now I'm incarcerated because when you're in holding, like, you can still see the guys, like, we're separated, but you can still kinda see them when you're at the last holding station, which is where after you see the judge, and I'm sitting in a room with my best friend who now knows that I narked, that I told the truth, and I incriminated her and everyone else, and I watch all of them get bailed out. I called my dad and he basically told me that I made my bed and now I had to lay in it. Didn't ask me what happened, didn't nothing, and then hung up on me. And my mother's on a fixed income, so I knew she wouldn't have the money. So I called her though, obviously, and her and my ex, a week later, I got bailed out because my ex helped my mom with money. And yeah, so I was in Maine population for a week when I first got arrested by myself. My
So you're in
friend
a
was
jail cell
gone.
for a week, just waiting
Mhm.
for someone to pay
Just
10
waiting.
grand to get you out.
Well, they didn't have to pay the whole 10 grand. It was like a percentage. I
Yeah.
can't remember what the actual amount was, but it was a decent chunk of change. It wasn't, a small amount of money. And I was charged with robbery, criminal conspiracy, and prostitution. So those were the charges. And then once you're arrested, you go through like this whole series of events. You have your arraignment when you're arrested, and then you have your preliminary hearing, then you have like your formal arraignment, and then you have like pretrial conferences. I mean, there's all kinds of shit. And it just takes an eternity to get to sentencing. And the DA, like, for my case, the district attorney, he saw something in me and he didn't want me to go to jail. I remember him telling me, well, you listen to the police, like, blah, blah, blah. But the
He
judge
saw
just
the
did.
naivete in you. And he was like,
Yeah,
no idea what she's in for.
yeah, because I believe he's the one who told the judge that I'm not built for jail, that I shouldn't go to jail.
I don't think you are either.
And
Is it who is?
yeah, right. And I just remember, like, the fear of not knowing was the worst part. And then getting sentenced, everyone else went upstate because they all got hit with the robbery and conspiracy. But both of us, me and my friend, our prostitution charges got dropped long before we went to big court.
What's big
And
court? So
then
this is all happening in the state of Pennsylvania. And what's considered upstate?
So when you get arrested, the preliminary hearing, it's called a magistrate. So the magistrate's like your local municipality hearings. And then so that's where you have your preliminary. And then once you have that, that's how you know what charges are going to stick. And that goes downtown to like big criminal courts. So at that point is when our prostitution charges got dropped. But then they held conspiracy and robbery for so called we call it big court, but it's criminal court. So that's like where they decide what's going to happen to you from there. You have your trial there and all of that. So whenever we went to trial, we all got a plea bargain. I'm pretty sure they did too. I know I did. So they dropped robbery for me. So I didn't go upstate. So upstate's like state prison, state penitentiary.
Basically, if they drop robbery, like you're going to a less of a crazy prison.
Yeah. So I didn't go to actual prison. So the way it works in the US, like you have your county jails, which is where I was. Then there's state prison and then there's federal prison. So I was at the very low side of it. I was only in county, and I thank God and the universe and whatever you want to believe in every single day that I didn't go to upstate prison, because that's where I think I would have crumbled, because I can guarantee you it's a total different ball game. This county, like you're in there with women who are like, prostitute, you have
maybe drugs, petty theft,
drugs.
Kind of
yeah.
stuff.
Like it's nothing like you're not going to find any like super hard criminals in county jail unless they're return offenders, which there are lots of those, which is really, really fucking sad. That should not be a thing. So I watched my friend and all the guys go upstate. So they all got 5 years for robbery in a state prison. And I got 1 to 2 years in county jail with option for work release. And the judge,
why? You're all doing the same crap. So why all of a sudden you get such a less sentence? Good, but because of this DA, like saw something in you?
I think it was because I told the truth. And also there was a lot of phone records that incriminated my friend. Like apparently she was telling the guys to just kill him. And I don't think the judge really liked that. So
no, I don't think so either.
I think there was a lot more hanging over their heads than mine because of the story, because of me telling the truth. So yeah, the cops I didn't get out. I don't think the cops even have the ability to decide that. And I just didn't know that.
It sounds like the judge could tell that you're along for the ride.
Yeah, which is essentially what it was. But I do take full responsibility, and I'm grateful that the judge saw it differently and didn't charge me with robbery, because I don't know what my life would have ended up like if I would have went state prison. And not to like say that my friend somehow is stronger than me, but honestly, like back then she was, because she wasn't like me. Like she's not a pushover. She's a very like mouthy, like, fuck you type person. Obviously she's out now, so she survived, and I just don't know what it would have been like. And it was really fucking scary at the same time. But in county, like I got work release. So here where I live in my county, we have a program that's associated with the jail. So you're still incarcerated, but you don't live in actual jail. So
is this what people call house arrest?
No. House arrest is house arrest, I wish I would have gotten house arrest, but
is that like the best of the best?
I don't know, but it's expensive to be on house arrest, so probably not. But
for you or expensive for the state?
For you.
What?
You have to pay to be on house arrest.
Pay
I can't remember the whole.
Who takes the money?
I don't know, to be honest. I just know it costs money. You have to like rent like your bracelet or something. I
This
forget
is a
how it all
goddamn
works.
business.
Yeah, it is. It all is. And so you get this ankle bracelet on house arrest and like you're
Yeah, I know
only allowed
that.
to like go. Yeah. So, but with work release, you still live in jail. So like there's a center that was like right next door and that's where I was staying for the majority of my sentence. But
You're almost like
whenever
a
I
little
got
bit more free, but was still within the grounds.
yes, yeah.
Okay,
So
you're just
you're
not in
allowed to
the
go.
cell.
Right. So you're allowed to go to work. I was allowed to go because I was pregnant. So I was allowed to go to like my doctor's appointments, all kinds of stuff. So like you have a little more freedom, but don't ever deviate and get caught because you go right back to county. And I think you get like your max sentence, get caught like not doing what you said you were supposed to. So that's always scary. But whenever I first got sentenced, I was allowed to leave for, say, I went straight to jail. I was told I could leave for 3 days to get everything in order with my son. But when I came back, I would have to take a piss test to make sure I wasn't using drugs.
Of course.
I couldn't pee. I'm pregnant and I couldn't fucking,
Why?
I don't know. I couldn't go. And I knew I was clean. I knew I hadn't done drugs, but that fact alone, I had to go back to main population for at least 30 days because 30
And
days
let's
that gives
start the
you.
cycle again.
So then once that 30 days passed, I was able to go to work release, but it wasn't instant. I don't remember how long I was actually there, but I knew it was at least 30 days. This girl who I was cellies with or cellmates with. So the guys like this is so crazy. I didn't do this, but I witnessed it numerous times. You could talk to the guys through the toilet bowl.
This is male and female, like mixed
N-
county jails.
No, no. Well, no, you're not mixed. You're in two separate buildings, but somehow you're not in two separate buildings, but you're like not intermixed. But
Yeah.
somehow with the piping, like literally, like you pump with your ass, like you pump all the water out of the toilet, and then you like talk like through the toilet to like men, and then you find out like what their cell is, and then you go to the guard like, hey, like, 'cause some of the guards are pretty cool and they would look up who was in that cell. And I'm telling you, like, the things that these women did to survive, and to have that connection with somebody. You could see, like, the cell windows, like, you could see sometimes into, like, a man's cell, and, like, my roommate, she's kinda gross, but she would get naked and, like, dance for him, and, like, I mean, it was insanity. It was like being in, like, bad girls college, like,
Literally.
really bad.
Oh my God, Amanda. What point in time are you sitting there? You're pregnant at this point.
I think that's what saved me too, was being pregnant.
Well, that's another avenue that I have to ask you about. But at what point are you sitting there and being like, what the fuck is my life?
Yeah.
Or are you wondering that at all
Yeah.
times? Like, when does it hit you being like, snap out of this?
I didn't snap out of my bullshit until about 3 years ago. So, but while being incarcerated, I, like, remember thinking to myself, "How did I get here? Like, what happened?" And, like, I look around at all these women, and I'm like, "I don't wanna be like these women." But at the end of the day, we were all the same. Like, there's nothing different about me. Okay, yeah, like, I look like the girl next door, and I got straight A's and never even got detention, and now I'm incarcerated, but I'm no different than Sally, who has been incarcerated multiple times because guess what? We were both doing drugs. I was being a prostitute, whether I realized it or not. I was doing that. I knew it was wrong. And I'm no better because we're all one decision away from making the worst mistake of our lives. And where I was, and they were all, like I said earlier, like we were all surviving the only way we knew how. And if the only way you know how is by robbing, stealing, cheating, and doing whatever you need to do to get by, to not be sick, to not have to live in a cardboard box for the night, you're gonna fucking do it. Period.
Of
You
course.
are. So
So let me start asking you the hard hitting questions. Why do you think some people make those choices versus different choices? You said it's all just one choice away. So what leads us down the wrong choice? Or do we even know it at the time?
I think as humans, we all crave connection. And when connection is taken away from you, or you're never taught what true connection is, so you're trying to figure it out on your own, you're going to fall flat on your face if a few times. Some people may be more fortunate than others, but I know for me, from the age of 15 on, I was left to my own devices much. My parents divorced, my mom left, best friend, I didn't understand. It hurt. Then my dad eventually, when I failed out of college, like he left me. That hurt. And then, I would have boyfriends who would leave me. That would hurt. So everything just hurt all the time. It just always hurt. And I just wanted to be accepted. I wanted somebody to save me from the insanity that became my life. And until 3 years ago, I didn't realize that I was the only one who could save me. Like, no one outside of myself can change anything about me because I have to be willing to do the hard work, the scary work, the shit that I avoided for so many years and was numbing in order to not make the choices, in order to see myself as somebody who deserves happiness because I never thought I did.
How long have
Honestly,
you been out of jail?
I've been out of jail for almost 13 years now. I think it
Okay.
was 2008. Yeah, I think it was 2008. I think I got out in 2009.
So why the hell did it
Um,
take 10 years to start like figuring out your own shit?
So it took that long, I think, and this is what I believe in hindsight, is because even though I went to jail and I hit that rock bottom, I lost everything, I still didn't know how to be myself. I was still looking for outside validation, and add to it now, I've lost my best friend. I don't have her anymore. Now I have to find somebody else to be my best friend so that I can become who they are, so that I can have what they have, and then move on to find another man. Like, I was dating someone while I was incarcerated and pregnant. I was constantly looking for somebody else still. And then now I'm a felon. Add that on top of it. So now I'm feeling even shittier about myself and that I don't deserve anything good. And so I ended up in a very toxic relationship for 7 years. I'm grateful for that relationship. Don't get me wrong. There was a lot of good, including my daughter, that came out of that relationship. But I never would have been there if I would have just paused and just could have been okay being alone for longer than 20 seconds. I couldn't handle being alone. And I left. I was at that point when I met him, I was in a 3-quarter house. So when you get out, there's not a whole lot of resources. So when I got out, I literally was just like on the streets and I was like, hey, I don't even know where I'm supposed to go. Luckily, my mother, came and picked me up or whatever. But for somebody else who doesn't have a mother to pick them up, you're just on the street because you have nowhere to go and you have to wait
That's a
to get a
broken
bed.
system.
It's very broken because then you have to wait to get a bed at wherever you want to go because everything's so tight and there's so many people coming out and blah, blah, blah. So eventually I got into the 3-quarter house. So when you're in a 3-quarter house, you get drug tested anytime you leave, anytime you come back, like you're under surveillance. You have some free will, but you have to be back at a certain time. If I said I'm going out with this person, but then someone sees me somewhere else, you can get in trouble for that. There's a lot of rules still. So you're still very much institutionalized. And
Yep.
so when I was there for about how long I had lived there, it's been a while. I lived there for almost a whole year. I lived there. But then I was desperate to go back to my hometown and I just wanted to get back there. So then I started dating men who lived there. And then I found this man who I thought was my knight in shining armor. And I gave up 3-quarter house and moved in with him. And yeah, it didn't get any better from that point forward.
Still
So
institutionalized, just in someone else's house.
yeah, pretty much. And, with him, the first warning sign that I should have left, he didn't physically hurt me.
But
He
other
was
abuse
very
hurts more oftentimes. Sometimes we'd rather a bruise.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And, and I didn't even know that he was abusive until way later, until after I had our daughter. Whenever we first got together, I remember I got a car and he didn't have a license yet. We were still in our early 20s and he didn't have a license yet. But I got this car as I thought, oh, this will help us. And he literally cried like a fucking baby. You
Why?
would have thought
Jealous?
yeah, very jealous. You would have thought I killed his dog. And I was so pissed. I told him to get the fuck out of my car. But guess what I did? I drive away. I'm free, fucking free. And I said, where the fuck am I going to go? I have nowhere to go. I have nowhere to go. And I went right back. And I stayed. And then I tried to leave him again because I just didn't feel like I loved him anymore. And he boohooed about that. So I stayed. And then I was like, well, let's have a kid together. I mean, I planned our daughter. It's not like she was an accident. Don't know why I thought that would help, but it did not help. It made it
You're still looking
worse.
for connection.
Very much so. And, he couldn't handle that he no longer had the freedom that he was used to having. I think that's what really triggered him through all that, but he had a lot of mental illnesses that I was not aware of, very narcissistic. And he told me eventually that he was in love with a famous person, and we're
But he
not
didn't know who that
talking.
is.
Well, I know who it is, but,
No, but did he
we're
know
not
who that was?
he did not know her personally, no.
Right.
This
In
is
love with an
a
idea of someone.
yes, this is a very fictitious relationship that he'd been having inside of his head for many years, and I didn't know.
Okay.
I didn't leave. I thought, "Okay, like, fix this. Nothing wrong, so go to therapy." He was going to therapy, I was going to therapy. And then he came home from one of his therapy sessions, and I laugh now, but in the moment, I believed him. But he told me that the, therapist told him that he can't rely on me to satisfy all of his sexual needs. And I said, "Okay, well, fuck that therapist," because the guy probably said something he didn't like looking
Yeah.
back, and he just wanted me to, like, feel a certain way. So, then we eventually go to couples therapy, and that was a disaster, and a year or so later, I left. I finally just had enough, like, he was just too much for me. I just couldn't handle it any longer, and just the anger, the violence, the threats that he would make, just, like, it was very scary, so I fled. I was originally planning to peacefully leave. I found an apartment. I got all that squared away, and then I was just gonna be like, "Dude, like, this is done, see ya, bye." But then he, like, went on some crazy war path, and so I went to a shelter while I waited for my apartment, and so she was really young, and she didn't really know what was going on,
No.
so but then we get our apartment and everything, and I felt so strong. I was like, "I got this. Like, I finally did it. I'm gonna be single, and I'm gonna raise these kids on my own." But then disaster just kept happening, and, like, my ex just wouldn't leave me alone, and then eventually I re-met my husband, so, like, I knew my husband previously.
This might be rude of me to ask. Where are your kids when you're going to a shelter? They're coming with you?
My daughter did. My son's to another man, so he was with his dad. He
Okay.
wasn't thank God, he wasn't really involved in this part
In all
of
this. Yeah.
yeah, and
How
that
old's your daughter
part of
at
that.
this point? A couple years old, hey?
Yeah, she's, like, 3. Yeah, she was 3.
Wow.
But the first step I took when I hit my rock bottom, wanting to end my life, but in the same moment, also wanting to keep living, I asked for help. I reached out to my husband and I said, "Hey, like this, I can't live like this anymore. Something needs to change. I don't know what's going on with me. I don't know why I can't seem to like ever get ahead. I'm always getting like disaster just keeps striking my life and I can't do it anymore." And so he helped me and I started doing a lot of like soul searching and, like, really trying to figure out what I want. That's when I found this job. That's when I started embracing my story, not as public as I am now with it, but, I was telling employers about it. I even got a job offer at another accounting firm that I did tell my story to. I literally told that story in a room full of 3 men who were much older than me, and then a guy who was probably, like, around my age. I told that fucking story. I told them that I was sexually assaulted by a man. In doing that, I felt so empowered, and they still offered me the job. They didn't take it because it wasn't enough money,
Mhm.
but still, like, that was me taking those steps of,
Yep.
like, "Okay, like, if I'm not gonna hide from this anymore, even though it's scary, my palms are sweating, I'm gonna cry, maybe puke, who knows, but I'm gonna do this, this is what I need to do." And then I told my boss that I have now about it, and she was like, "I'm so sorry you had to go through that, and I still wanna move forward with hiring."
What
It's
did that say to you?
embracing. That changed the narrative in my head that I had to hide it. That
Mhm.
literally is what made me think, "Okay, I don't have to hide.
Mhm. I
Doesn't
think
have
you
to
telling
be."
that story is the reason she hired you.
I think so too. I think, that I didn't hide it. I was honest. I told her what happened, through and through, just like I tell you, just like I tell anybody. And it helped me see it from a different perspective. So now, like when I think about my story, it's not something I need to hide. It's something that I embrace. It's something that it's a tool that I can use to help other people. So why am I hiding it? because by hiding it, I'm helping no one, and I'm the person I'm helping the least is myself, and I
Mhm.
need to care about myself more than I used to.
Type of job you're doing, if people haven't gone through what you've gone through, how the hell would they do a good job in your shoes? How the hell do you
Yeah.
have any compassion or empathy for people that you're dealing with if you've had
Yeah, and
a perfect life?
there's stories that I hear when people call in for an appointment that literally break my heart, and I so bad wanna be like, "Okay, listen, this is what you need to do," but I can't because 'cause I'm not a therapist,
But you
but
still, yeah, you have to go through, like, only
yeah.
play within the bounds that you can, of course.
Yeah,
But
and
they can hear the empathy and compassion in your voice. People have great intuitions. They feel the understanding. They feel not judged when they're talking to you.
yeah, and I can tell because sometimes people will talk to me for, like, an hour, and I'll be like, "So, can you tell me a little about why you're seeking therapies?" I have to ask that, and some people will
They'll
just,
tell
like,
everything.
unleash, and I'm like, "Whoa," like, that was
You're like, I needed 3
whoa.
words.
That was, like, really heavy, but thank you for sharing that with me. I'm gonna go cry now. But, people go through shit, and we need to know society, everyone, we all need to know that it's okay to go through shit. Like, you don't need to hide it. You don't need to be ashamed of it because by hiding it and feeling ashamed of it, that just continues that narrative that it's not okay. It's not okay to have mental illnesses. It's not okay to have a criminal record. It's not okay to failed out of college. It's not okay to have done drugs at some point in your life or be an alcoholic. But these things are all side effects of life, side effects of trying to fit in. We all do things. Whether you get caught or not and get a criminal record is one thing, but we all make bad choices. And we need to normalize and know that it's okay and that you can overcome them. That doesn't have to be your life. You don't have to live in this shame-filled mindset for the rest of your life like I did. Like, I would love to have met me 10 years ago and be like, "Yo, like, wake the fuck up. Go do what you wanna do despite it. Prove to everyone that that's not gonna stop you." And I wish I would have started sooner, but who cares? I didn't. That's what I had to go through to get to where I am. Help other people not have to do what I did for a decade of my life.
I have 1,000 more questions for you, but I know I can't have you all day, even though I want it. I'm here craving connection. We're cut from the same cloth.
Gotta
But
have connection.
I want to ask you one big question, and you don't have to feel like you got to get into it too much, because I feel like it's a full other episode. But the prison system is fucking broken in the States. I know it. I don't even live in the States. You know it because you went through it. High level, what do you think needs to change?
I think honestly, like the thing that needs to change is there needs to be more acceptance. People need to stop judging us and seeing us as a whole as bad people or that we don't deserve. Like when you get out of jail and you have a felony record, like you're no longer human. Like
In the eyes
I
of
have
who?
my in the eyes of the law.
Society?
So like yeah, so I'm not legally allowed to carry a gun. I'm not even so much legally allowed to touch a gun. So if I'm sitting here and someone just beats down my door, my life is less valuable than theirs. There's the right to vote. I know here in Pennsylvania, I have my right to vote again, but it takes a certain amount of time. But I've heard other people say that they still don't have the right to vote. So I don't know, like,
Really?
yeah, I'm not sure how that works nationwide. And also, like, we're denied housing. So if I say I lost my job, lost everything, I could not get public housing because I have a felony record. Certain jobs I can't get. I can't volunteer at my child's school. I can't volunteer at domestic violence shelters. There's a lot of things I literally can't do because of my record, and I think it's fucked. And there needs to be more people willing to give second chances to those who have been incarcerated with felony records, and there also needs to be when you get out, you should not just be put out on the streets. If we wanna change how many people go back, then you need to change what's available to those when they get out. I'm not saying that there should be a limousine waiting for people who've been incarcerated, obviously not, but there should be some sort of service that picks you up and takes you somewhere safe
Because a
because
lot of times, if you've been incarcerated, a lot of people's families don't want anything to do with them. They're
right.
ashamed, they're pissed off, they're hurt, they're betrayed. So
Yeah.
it's like even the people that you left aren't there anymore. So yeah, you end up
Yeah.
on the streets and it's a bad cycle.
Yeah,
And
and
then
it's cycle.
you're inevitably going to go right back to jail.
Yeah. Or, or worse, you end up dead. How many people get
Mhm.
incarcerated because they got caught with heroin? You put a
Mhm.
heroin addict back out on the street and they're not all, they didn't get the help they needed inside, like they didn't go to recovery or get any sort of like actual help, then guess what they're gonna do? They're gonna go shoot up again and then they're gonna die. But
Yeah.
no one thinks about that.
They feel safer in jail. They want to go back
Yeah.
sometimes.
There's homeless people who will literally break the law just to go to jail so they can eat. How
Yeah.
fucked is that? Homeless people are also that's a huge issue too. Like, we should have more resources. Like, you mean to tell me that we can spend buku bucks on, like, all this other shit in the US, but you can't help out someone who doesn't have a roof over their head? You'd rather donate money to other countries when you haven't even taken care of your own? Like, I'm sorry, like, I don't wanna get in trouble, but that's
That's
really,
how I
really
feel.
fucking irritates me. Like, this is our country. We should take care of our people first,
Mhm. Of
period. Yes, do I care about third world countries? Of course I
course.
fucking do. If I could help everyone on this planet, I would. But that's not the case, and we have to take care of our own first. Just like we have to take care of ourselves first, it's you, your family, and then everyone else in your country, and then start branching out. The way I see it is people coming here from other countries are better taken care of than us. I'm sorry, but there's something really wrong with that. My husband could go on and on. He's the one to talk to about that kind of stuff because
Mhm.
he's just like, and it's infuriating. And
Yeah.
I just don't understand. And I think that when it comes to incarceration, like, we need us who have been incarcerated, who are out, we need to speak up. We need to come together. And I've been trying really hard to do that. So anyone that I meet or see that's been incarcerated, like, I try to bring them on my podcast because I want our voices to be heard.
We're human and we made a couple
Yeah,
bad choices.
because yes, because before we're anything else, we're human.
Mm.
We're not felons, we're not criminals, we're not ex-cons, we are people, period, and we deserve respect. We deserve to be able to get housing for our family. We deserve good jobs, because if you wanna keep us out of jail, what are we supposed to do if all we can work at is McDonald's? I'm sorry, that's like in itself, working at McDonald's is unless you're, like, retired or you really like fast food or you're a teenager, it's humiliating,
I agree. I know what you're saying.
So we need to
How do
that
you have
needs to
any pride for
stop.
your life afterwards?
Yeah, and it's hard and it's fucking scary, and a lot of times even now, like, when I tell my story, I worry that, someone's gonna come back from my past and, like, be pissed off at me and why past employers especially, I worry about that. But at the end of the day, I have to keep doing this because in order to change that narrative, in order to help be a part of the good side of it, to show up and tell people that we are human, I have to keep telling the story
Amen to that.
regardless.
Amanda, this conversation has been riveting. It's the only word I can say. I have so many more questions and yeah, your story is crazy, but it just goes to show that it doesn't matter what label you put on of like what choices or bad choices you've made. It really stems back to as humans, we want connection. As humans, we want to feel love. As humans, we want to feel a purpose in the world. And if
Yeah.
we don't, we're going to find a way of how to get that,
Yeah,
good or bad.
exactly. When I was incarcerated, like, I know I let my dad down in some way, even though he still to this day has never asked me what happened. As family members of those who've been incarcerated, I think there needs to be more of an understanding. I know don't enable an addict. I know, like, all those things, but I don't know. My heart, my soul just says that family should always be there for you. And mine never was, besides for my mother. Other than my mother, like, nobody ever was. Even though some of them may have had the means to help me, nobody did. And I think that's wrong, and I think that as families, we need to do better. We need to actually come together and support each other no matter what. You should never have to go to a family function feeling judged. I'm sorry, but you shouldn't, and if you're made to feel that way, then you need to just cut ties like I did.
I know anyone listening to this episode is going to want more of you. So please plug your podcast, all of your channels, because I know they're going to be like, I need more. We're now addicted to you.
Yeah, I mean, my podcast is the Let Good Things In show. It's on all platforms. It's gonna be centered around formerly incarcerated people, addicts, and anything related to mental illness. And then I have my Facebook group, which is the Let Good Things In show as well. You're more than welcome to there. And I'm gonna be launching my coaching practice in January, which I'm gonna help people get over their fears and be able to live the life that they dream of having regardless of their past.
Amanda, this has been an absolute pleasure. Like,
Thank you.
I think you brought up a lot of big topics that people are almost a little too afraid to ask about. You know,
Yeah,
not
and you
many
did
people know about like incarcerated people, especially like a young female. That's not who we think is in prison.
it's real people in there.
Mhm.
Real people with hearts and needs and desires, just like us on the outside.
I know. Amanda, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.